All right, ladies and gentlemen, this video is going to be RV3, Bohr models, and how to draw them. So if you took baby chem, you have seen a ton of Bohr models. You made a model yourself of the Bohr model of some specific atom, but Bohr models are going to show up all the time in this class. You will see probably several of them on the AP test if you choose to take that, but basically they're just this flat model that pays attention most to electrons. It's also known as the planetary model, and looking at it, you can probably see why, because if you look at a Bohr model, you see that the nucleus of the atom is in the center, and all those electrons are orbiting around the nucleus just like little tiny planets, right? So again, electrons in this particular model are going to be considered the most important. And in that way, sometimes you'll even see protons and neutrons barely addressed at all. Like if you look at this drawing over here, the protons and neutrons are addressed, but barely. The numbers are just written in the center. And that's going to be most of the Bohr models you see. Because while this one on the left tends to look prettier, in terms of drawing that out, that starts to become a giant pain, because as atoms get larger, they have lots of protons and lots of neutrons, and drawing those protons and neutrons like this is really annoying to do. So again, most of the Bohr models you're going to see, and most of the Bohr models I'll ask you to do, are going to be like the one on the right, where you just write the number of protons and write the number of neutrons in the center, and the only thing you're physically drawing out would be the electrons. So the two examples that I put down there are beryllium, like you saw in RV1 and review video 2, just to kind of keep things constant so you know what you're looking at. In terms of figuring out how to draw a Bohr model, it's all about the periodic table. So I put a little picture of the periodic table right there so you can see it. It's not super clear, but it doesn't really need to be, because drawing a Bohr model is all about where that atom is on the periodic table, so you know how many circles you need to be drawing and how many electrons you need to draw in each circle. All right, so we're going to be looking at the atom carbon for the example of how to draw Bohr models. So carbon, in case you missed it with my giant circling, carbon is over there on the periodic table, and step one of figuring out how to draw a Bohr model is figuring out the number of protons and the number of neutrons in that specific element, which I went over how to do that specifically in RV2, so if you're not sure, you can go back and look at that. I put the little square for carbon over here on the right-hand side so that you could actually see it. But as we know, the amount of protons is always going to be the atomic number found on the top. So carbon is going to have 6 of those protons. And the way you figure out neutrons is you're going to take your average atomic mass on the bottom, and then you're going to subtract out the atomic number for that. So we're going to take 12.01, that bottom number, we're going to subtract out 6, and that's going to give us 6.01. And we are also going to round that off to a whole number because we can't have 0.01 of a neutron. So we're going to say that atoms of carbon have 6 neutrons. Now, what do you do with that information? Well, if you're going to draw a Bohr model, you just put that information in the center, just like in this example up here. So I'm going to do that all the way in the bottom. We are going to put 6 protons and 6 neutrons in the center. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is figuring out how many shells or how many circles you're going to draw. So we're right here. The nice thing about that step is it's really easy to do. Your number of circles that you should be drawing is the same as the row number that that element is in on the periodic table. And by row number, I do mean horizontal row from left to right. So let's take a look and see where carbon is. All right, carbon, it looks like, is in row 2. This is row 1, that's row 2, that's where carbon is. So we're going to draw 2 circles around carbon in our Bohr model. So I'm going to go back down to our Bohr model, and we're going to draw 2 circles. 1, 2. It's not the neatest thing because I'm hand drawing this, but it doesn't need to be. So that's step 2. Done. Checked off. We put 2 circles because carbon is in row 2, so we drew 2 circles. Amazing. Next, we need to figure out how many electrons to put in each circle. In terms of Bohr models, this might be the hardest part, but again, it's really not all that difficult. The number of electrons that you put in each circle is the same thing as the number of boxes in that particular row on the periodic table. So let's take a look at that. Row 1 on the periodic table is going to have a certain amount of boxes, and that amount of boxes is how many electrons we draw in the inner circle. So let's go back up to our picture of the periodic table. Again, we're looking at row 1, which is this one right here. I see that in row 1, there is 2 boxes. Great, amazing. So that means that I am going to draw 2 electrons in that inner circle. Row 1 has 2 boxes, so I should draw 2 electrons in the inner circle. Cool. So I'm going to draw 2 electrons. Done. Now we need to address row 2, or circle 2. Carbon is in that second row, so in row 2, we're going to draw the rest of carbon's electrons. So let's figure out real quick how many electrons that should be. In row 2, I'm going to stop when I hit carbon. So I see that we are 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes over by the time I hit carbon. So I'm going to draw 4 dots, or 4 electrons, in that second circle on my Bohr model. Carbon is in the the 4th box in row 2, so I'm going to draw 4 electrons. Cool. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're done. That's our Bohr model for carbon. Is it the prettiest thing in the world? No. Again, I hand drew it. Yours doesn't have to be super pretty and pristine and perfect, but you do have to have the correct amount of electrons in the correct place, and that's how you do it. One thing that I'd like to note about this method is, unfortunately, as our elements get larger, rule 3, that how many electrons you should draw in each circle, it starts to break. And it's kind of annoying, but how you fix it is also not that difficult. So as our elements get bigger, they start having a lot more electrons. And if you remember electron configuration, which was that 1s2, 2s2, 2p6 thing that we did last year, there were certain groups of boxes on the periodic table that we started changing row numbers for. And those are the same exact boxes that we're going to address here. So our D block boxes are going to actually shift back to the row or circle before, and our F block boxes are going to shift back 2 rows or 2 circles. So basically, that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, but let me explain. Let's say, for example, that you are trying to draw the element iron, right? Iron is going to be all the way down in row 4 on the periodic table. So if I was going to draw its Bohr model, I'm just going to put the symbol in the center and skip the amount of protons and neutrons. But because it's in row 4, I would draw 4 circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So this one's getting pretty big. Now, as soon as you get to that 4th row, counting the boxes is going to be a little bit different, because with the method I just told you, in that 4th circle, theoretically, there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons. But that's not at all the case. There are actually only 2 in the outer circle, and it's because these ones here, these D block ones that fall within that shaded red region, actually shift back to the circle before. So any of those, these ones here, and again, I'll shade it in a little bit darker so you can tell which ones I'm talking about, any of those that you would have drawn in the 4th circle actually end up going in this circle, along with all of the ones that were in row 3 beforehand. So again, it's just a question of moving them to the appropriate circle. But the good news for you guys is that you're really not going to have to draw the bigger elements, hardly at all. There might be like 1 or 2 of them on a practice worksheet as a challenge, but on the AP test, you will not have to draw a Bohr model that's that large. You're going to be limited to basically rows 1 through 3 all of these ones because A, they're easier to draw, and B, what the AP test is looking for you to be able to do is just distribute the correct electrons to the correct place. And it's just a time waster to do the heavier elements. So if you're not sure how to draw Bohr models correctly, or if you have questions on how to distribute D and F block boxes or anything like that, you can always ask me and I'm happy to help you.